Okay, so today I'm going to talk about why bad habits don't need telling off, they just need replacing, right? And let me expand on that. What tends to happen, and I'm sure we've all been there, I was there for years and years and years, stuck in this never-ending loop of telling myself off every time I did something that was contrary to the goal that I was trying to achieve. For example, I reckon on at least 60, 70 occasions, I uttered those infamous words, "That's it, I'm never drinking again." Only to completely undo that habit weeks, days, minutes later sometimes. Right, and we've all been there, whether it's to start the exercise routine or whether it's to write that book that we've always promised ourselves. We set these goals and we try to make these behavioural changes through new habits, and we make these lovely rational choices, and then we don't do the things that we promised ourselves we would do. And I mean promise. How many times have you been there where you really meant it? It's not just one of those things that I'm going to do this thing. You're bought into it. You mean it, and then you don't do it. Right? It's incredibly disappointing, isn't it? When you've been in that situation, and I think most people have, whether it's around the way they move their body, their diet, whether they save for a house, all those traditional type goals. We've all been there at some point where I think we promise ourselves we'll do something, we make a lovely rational choice, and we don't do it. So then what do? We then try the well-worn method of berating ourselves with a stick. The stick comes out and we go, "That's it, you're a failure, you're rubbish, you never follow through, you never do the things that you said you were going to do, you could never eat healthily, you could never move your body every day. What's the point? I may as well give up." Right? And again, I wouldn't be surprised if almost everyone listening has been exactly in that position at some point over something they're trying to change in their lives. Out comes the stick, we hit ourselves, and we promise ourselves, based on the fact that we've just given ourselves a good metaphorical beating verbally, because we talk to ourselves so awfully most of the time, that in itself will be enough to motivate us to make sure that from now on we'll always do the things that we promise ourselves we'll do, only to trip ourselves up again and drive ourselves nuts and go, why is that happening? How is that happening? As a wise man once said, the definition of madness is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. Right, and that was me for many, many years, constantly just in that loop. Saying that I'd do something, not doing it, telling myself off for not doing it, promising myself I was going to do it better next time, only to not do it again, tell myself off again. We just get caught, we're going round and round and round. That's why New Year's resolutions almost look identical every year we write them, because nothing's happening. But then, 10 years ago, I started to get intrigued as to what was happening. Why was I continually doing the same thing over and over again? And I thought, hold on, there's got to be a different way to do this. This is just not working. And that's when I started to study a lot and really get into the science of habit change and behavioural change, as to go, what on earth is going on? And the big discovery that started to change everything was the discovery of the habit loop. Many of you will be familiar with this anyway if you've read Charles Duhigg's book on habits. It's a great book if you're interested in this stuff. It's not very much of a how-to, but it's a really interesting insight into the way that habits work. But anyway, this is your how-to. The habit loop is this, at a really basic level. There is a trigger or a cue, right? A trigger or a cue. That's the first part of the habit loop. There's a routine that you play, and there's a reward at the end. It's basically how it works, right? And then craving sort of ignites the whole thing. We crave that reward. So when the trigger comes, we play the same routine to get the reward, which we then crave, and it sort of solidifies this habit loop. Now, if you think about it, you've got these habit loops playing all over your life, from when you brush your teeth to you make a cup of tea, to the way that you react emotionally to certain situations. These are all habits that you've learned over the years that at some point create that neural loop of trigger, routine, reward, craving, vump, habit loop, habit loop, habit loop. They're sort of everywhere. But one of the great things that I'm trying to help people do, and it took me years to figure this out, is that these subconscious sort of habits and routines, you can sort of consciously go in there and start to reprogram them, right? And the key part to all of this is not trying to completely erase or overwrite well-worn habits. Because if you think about it, habits are like, I think I've described it before as the grooves in a record, like old vinyl records that you get. And the more you play the same habit loop, the deeper the groove gets, essentially, right? So the needle on the record slots back into that groove much more easily and quickly. That's like a well-worn habit or routine. So trying to come along and make just a nice little rational choice to like erase that groove completely is incredibly difficult. Caveat, it can be done, but it's incredibly difficult. But what I realized from looking at the science of habits and behavioral changes, that the clever way, the stealth way, the ninja-like way to change your habits, and this could be anything from the way that you move your body to the way that you eat to the way that you react to certain situations, is to keep the habit loop intact, i.e. keep that groove on the record, because again, it's a really difficult thing just to erase that, but just swap the bit in the middle, the routine bit. It's really important. Swap that routine bit. So you essentially keep the trigger, keep the reward, you're just going to swap the routine in the middle. Of course, this is easier said than done, right? But let's just use an example. Let's say you've slipped into a habit that's frustrating you, which is that 7 o'clock snack, especially around now in these turbulent times, right? I think there's a lot of people slipping into snacking habits that maybe didn't exist before because work and the business of life was almost in the way. But now, like where we're confined at home, there's a real temptation just to wander into the kitchen or the pantry or whatever it is for you and just grab a snack. And let's just say the trigger, because triggers can be time, they can be preceding emotions, they can be other people. Let's just say it's a time trigger. About 7 o'clock every night, you've slipped into this little routine, putting on the news or the telly or whatever it is, and then you get this like almost craving because you've built this loop for something a bit naughty, a snack, as it were. That's the trigger. 7 o'clock's the trigger. The routine is you walk into the kitchen, open the fridge or open the pantry, you grab something. Could be savoury, could be sugary, whatever it is for you. You eat the snack. The reward is there's that comfort of chilling out in front of the telly whilst scoffing some food, right? We've all been there a squillion times. And then you start to crave that. So what happens? Around 7 o'clock, your body almost from a physiological and psychological standpoint starts to crave this thing. It gets a bit unsettled, a bit almost anxious if it can't get what it wants, which is this sort of snacky thing. You almost can't quite put your fingers on it, but all of a sudden 7 o'clock comes around, that trigger goes off without you even thinking about it. It becomes like this subconscious thing. You're in the kitchen or you're in the fridge and then you're eating something. And what tends to happen is then we get really disappointed by that. Maybe even on a daily basis. Right now, almost every single day, you're like, can't believe I did that again. Like, I don't want to snack. It's not in line with the way that I want to eat healthily. I'm putting on weight because I'm not moving as much because of the current situation. Whatever it is for you. But why let that sit in your life unchallenged and unchanged? Because it will just constantly bring you down on a daily basis. Forget the fact that you're eating unhealthy food every evening. The psychological fallout of that is that it's just disappointing. It's just like, again? So you don't really get to enjoy it for very long because there's that follow through of disappointment that comes from it and regret, because actually you're starting to say to yourself, I don't want to do that anymore. Anyway, now play a different scenario. What you do is you keep the trigger, you keep the reward, you just swap the routine. This is the hard bit, right? None of this stuff is easy. If it was easy, there'd be no need for me to talk about it. We'd all just make change all the time. None of us would have bad habits and we'd all be perfect. All right, in reality, we all know that's just not the truth. The truth is we are perfectly imperfect humans. We have to work hard at creating the structure and the framework to support the life that we want to lead. So I'm just using this little example at the moment, right, of the habit loop and the snack. So what you do is this: keep the trigger, keep the reward, swap the routine. 7 o'clock comes around, that trigger, because it's quite a well-worn groove in that record. Just trying to erase that is really difficult. So just run with it, just be stealth. Your mission, change the routine. Keep the trigger, keep the reward, change the routine. So what you could do is this. First and foremost, to give yourself a head start, remove the snacks from the house. I know that's not always possible, so let's just play along. If it is, remove the unhealthy snacks and supplant healthy snacks. Right, make it really easy for you when you're triggered and you go into the kitchen or the whatever it is where you go, that place that you go to get that unhealthy snack. Ideally, remove them. If you can't remove them from the house completely, i.e. throw them away, put them in a new location that's a bit harder to reach. It sounds innocuous, but it'll make a massive difference. And then in their place, put nuts, apples, protein bars, whatever it is that you can think of that's a healthy-ish, as best you can, snack in the same place. So that when the trigger comes, you go in, you play the routine. Maybe this time you grab an apple or you grab some nuts, some seeds, whatever it is for you, or a protein bar. And then you still get the reward of that sort of satisfying, comfy snack. Here comes the caveat again. I am fully aware that a handful of nuts versus a chocolate bar is a world of difference, right? I'm not, naive enough to realise that there isn't a big change. But that's the bit that I'm talking about. That's the difficult bit. That's the challenge, because this is not meant to be easy for you, but the challenge is much smaller now. It's not that you've got to completely erase this habit that's in your life. All you've got to do is change the routine. That is a struggle. That is a habit. It will take a bit of practice, and it's a bit harder to eat a handful of nuts as it is to just grab a chocolate bar. I totally get that. But that's the little wrestle. Instead of it being a big thing that you've got to overcome, you've just got to overcome that. And what I will also say, just on this note, you'll be amazed at how quickly the habit and the craving and the whole loop closes around the new routine. In the sense that you'll be amazed how quickly, because you're going to have to force it through for the first couple of nights. You'll have to force it through to eat nuts as opposed to chocolate. I'm just using these as examples, right? But you'll be amazed how quickly the loop closes, and all of a sudden 7 o'clock comes, and rather than you craving that snack which is chocolatey and sugary, you will still crave something, but it'll be savoury and it'll be nut-based, for example. It's a really interesting experiment and a great way to give you a good glimpse and insight into transforming your habits, right? And we've just used one example there, a snacking habit, a bad habit. Now you think you can play that out through all the habits and routines that you have in your life. It's the same process. Look at the habits and routines that are not serving you. Find out what the routines are, and one by one, replace them. Go in and replace everything. Get into that subconscious. Bring it into your conscious, those habits and routines, and start to tweak them all. Right? Keep the triggers, keep the rewards, swap out the routines. Anyway, so here's what I'd like you to do if you want to play along. Like today, find out one of these habit loops, right? They're sort of everywhere. You've probably got this snacking habit loop. I think loads of people have slipped into that with everything that's happening in the world at the moment. And just perform the actions that I said. Remove the unhealthy snacks if you can, and replace them with healthy snacks. Or see if there's another loop that's in your life that's annoying you at the moment or frustrating you. Do the exact same thing. Make it difficult to play the old routine, and make it really easy to play this new routine. Then repeat that a few times and see if this new habit loop forms around the healthy routine, right? And right there you would have transformed something. That sort of stuff is really powerful when you get into it, because you start to realize you've got way more control over your subconscious than you ever thought possible. Rather than telling yourself off and berating yourself off for another slip up, like, get proactive about it. Take charge of your life. All right. Hopefully that was enjoyable. Don't forget, if you enjoy this stuff, please share it with your friends far and wide. I am here every day at 12 p.m. to cheer you on.